question of how, that leads to a question of how long we will maintain the recordings. I believe under the broadcast committee, and Jordan, you're probably going to know this even better than I am. I believe the Board of Commissioners maintains the recordings for 4 years. Do I have a motion on from any commissioner? Do you have a will of how long to maintain the recordings?
I would move for a year's retention period.
Is there support for a 1-year retention of the apportionment Zoom meetings? I will support that. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We will keep those for 1 year then. And they will be on the county's website. So, okay, please join me as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Christy, could you please call roll call for us? Thank you. Here.
County Prosecutor David Reeder.
Here.
County Treasurer Jenny Nash.
Here.
Republican Chair Megan Reckling.
Here.
Democratic Chair Judy Daubenmeier. Here. We have a quorum present.
Thank you. If I could just remind commission members, please make sure that your microphone is on and that you're basically eating the microphone so that people in the public can hear you. So at this time, we will go ahead and open the call to the public. We will allow people who want to address the apportionment commissioners 3 minutes to address the board at this time. We'll go ahead and we'll start with those who are in the room. Yeah, Jordan, if you want to address the commission, just come up and make sure you use one of the microphones, please. Thank you. And if you just provide your name and address, we would appreciate that.
Yes, my name is Jordan Genso. I live at 1628 Wood Lake Circle in the city of Brighton. I served on the reapportionment committee back in 2011. I believe I'm the only one in the room to have served on the committee back then. So I wanted just to share my perspective of what I learned from having done this 10 years ago. And really, it is a process that is a conflict between the ideal and the political. Because the nature of what this whole process is about has political consequences, it's really difficult to keep out that political inclination to view the whole thing through that lens. But I come today to ask that each member of the committee do their best to keep the ideal in mind and why the process is occurring at all, which is the whole idea of our government, our county government should be represented, should have representatives for as close as possible an equal number of residents in the county with as few breaks in the municipal lines as possible. And so those really should be the only criteria upon which maps are judged and the process takes place, is to minimize the population variance and to minimize the number of broken townships or cities in our county. There are other things that I learned that I think could improve upon the process from last time. I do think it's great that this is being streamed over Zoom. That is very accessible for the public. I do also think possibly having the meetings occur throughout the county and not just in Howell may make it more accessible to the public. And maybe I'm biased in that as a Brighton City resident, but I don't think it only has to occur here. But overall, it's just a matter of trying to keep the divisive partisanship out of this as best as possible. We all There's no reason to pretend otherwise. It's a very Republican county, and the districts, no matter how they're drawn, likely to remain the same. So let's then, if there's no real partisan benefit to going the bad route, just stick with the ideal, draw the lines in a way that keeps the population variance as small as possible and keeps the townships whole and the municipalities whole. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who, Mr. Luria?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan Luria, 6210 Cowell Road. And speaking of drawing boundaries, that would be Pinckney schools, Hamburg taxes, and Brighton mailing address. I just want to raise an issue that's kind of a follow-on to Jordan's point. Because of the fact that this is a county dominated by one political party, I'm interested in issues of data custody. I want to make sure that the public has access to the final census data as quickly as this commission has access to it, so that the public's in a position to be able to draw and propose maps. And this isn't something that only comes from the county's GIS department. I have no reason to think that the GIS department is in some way been politicized, but I think it's always a danger in a single party county. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Good afternoon. Please just provide your name and address to the
Bob Sexton,
commissioners.
11115 Bertha Court, Brighton, Michigan, and that's in Brighton Township. I'm here actually to observe the process. As old as I am, I have never seen how this is done, and I may not be around for the next division, so I thought it better be time for me to come and see what goes on in this. But secondly, I would concur, I think it would be ideal if this group met in different parts of the county, so different groups of people would be able to see the process and see how this would happen. It only happens once every 10 years, and so it's essential that people feel like they have the opportunity to be involved. You know, we live in a time when people question the openness of government anyway, and so I think it becomes real important to make sure that we open the process up to everybody. And for that, I thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone? I don't see anyone on Zoom. Nathan, do you have any desire to address the commission?
I don't, but thanks for the offer.
Okay, we will go ahead and close the call to the public at this time. And next on the agenda is just an introduction of commission members. None of the five of us were here 10 years ago when this process took place, so I thought it might be a good thing to introduce the members. I'll go ahead and get it started. I am Elizabeth or Betsy Hundley, the Livingston County Clerk. I've been in Livingston County since 1989, and I'm looking forward to this process. So we'll just go to my left and then we'll work back around.
I am Megan Reckling, Chair of the Livingston County Republican Party. I have also lived in Livingston County since 1989 and am looking forward to the process this year.
Hello, I'm Jenny Nash, Livingston County Treasurer. Born and raised in Livingston County. There's no better community in my opinion. And again, looking forward to the process.
My name is Judy Daubenmeier, and I'm Chair of the Livingston County Democratic Party. And I too have lived in Livingston County since 1989.
That was a good year.
That's a good year.
I like it very much. I could live anywhere in the world, but I like to live here. So I'm looking forward to this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Reeder. I'm your Livingston County prosecutor. I've lived in Livingston County all my life. My parents lived in Livingston County all their lives. My great-grandparents, grandparents, great-great-great-great-grandparents came to Livingston County before it was Livingston County. They were here before Michigan was a state. Harger Cemetery, which is just around the corner from where I reside in Marion Township. As my great grandparents, Samuel and Sarah Lyons. I agree with everybody. It's a wonderful place to live, but it's changed over the years since I've been here. And I'm hoping to fulfill in a manner that is meets with everybody's approval my statutory and constitutional duties with this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on. Next on the agenda, we have distribution of materials. I just want to make known, we did provide each of the commission members a packet that has the agenda and a few documents that was available to the public in the link that was provided. And it's got a copy of the law, a copy of a letter from Mr. Dave Stoker, and some draft rules of procedure that will be being considered. So that is the material that has been distributed to all members. So at this time, Dave, if you would be so kind as to provide an update on the Michigan statutes and the relevant case law to the commissioners.
Madam Chairperson, if I may, from the Prosecutors Association, I did receive information on how to access the census data directly from the United States Census. There's detailed instructions on how to get to Michigan, how to get to the county, how to get to the maps that are provided by the census. And I would just ask that this would be copied and distributed to members of the commission, as well as any members of the public that are in attendance.
Yes, we can do that. Amy, can you have color copies made? Thank you. We can also make sure that that information is contained in the official packet, which we can include online so that members of the public have access to that same information as well. Thank you. All right, Mr. Stoker, welcome. Thank you for
Okay.
joining
And I'm
us.
on and people can see me, I assume. So again, I'm Dave Stoker with Cole Stoker and Toskey, County Corporation Counsel for Livingston County. And we have worked with the county since prior to 1989. So the good news is I don't think we've ever had an issue where we had to deal with reapportionment. And we actually have typically not been too involved in this process because we haven't needed it. It's actually run relatively smoothly in your county. So it may not always seem to the commission members, but from a legal perspective, we haven't had major issues, which is good. That's the goal. Again, it's a statutory requirement of this commission that gets to be created every 10 years. And we expect you all to come up like Jordan next time and be able to tell everybody how it happened another 10 years from now and give advice. The function is, of course, to do twofold. One is you establish the number of commissioners. And secondly, you then establish the districts. That is the goals of what you need to do by statute. And yours is a statutory process as well. A couple things that are right in the statute, and you've got a copy of the statute and we reference it in our a letter that's in the packet. But some of the things you've already done. The first thing that happens is the clerk calls you to order. That's happened. One of the other things you're required to do then is to adopt rules. We have some proposed rules in the packets, and that's obviously you'll need to talk about those. One of the few things you can actually do now, because we don't have the census information yet. And most apportionment commissions are dealing with those rules at this point, and then they're sort of waiting to move forward. Again, it's a public commission. It's subject to Open Meetings Act. And of course it is, we noticed it, and it's on Zoom even. Documents are subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So that would also be true. And the quorum of the board is a majority but it requires a majority of the apportionment commission, majority of the full commission to adopt anything. So you need 3 votes to pass things, essentially, even if only 4 are at the meeting. Hopefully you'll be able to make all the meetings, but so that's just a little bit of the procedural piece of it. The function of creating the districts and designating commissioners, the statute provides that you have 60 days from the publication of the census. And the statute also provides that the Secretary of State has 15 days from the publication of the census to provide it to you, up to 15 days, so it could be quicker. What all it distills down to is you may have only 45 days to do this. So that's something to keep in mind in the whole process. And it'll probably necessarily be sort of fast-paced once we do get the data. You can get extensions from the Court of Appeals, but that's a process where you literally have to petition the Court of Appeals and tell them why you need the extension. So there is that ability to do that. Ideally, you won't have to. Actually, smaller counties have a smaller time frame than we do, but we have the 60 days. Again, it's measured from when the state gets or when the census is actually published, not when the Secretary of State gives it to us. The vote or the creation of districts process, you have those 45 days, and then once you approve a plan, someone would have 30 days after. It needs to be then filed with the county clerk, and technically people then have 30 days to appeal it. If you do not approve a plan within the 60 days, then public is authorized to, any resident is a registered voter is allowed to submit a plan, and you would have all of those plans, and you would then need to pick from them. So you would then not be doing your own, you'd be picking from the ones that people submit to you. You would have only that choice. So it's probably important to do it within the 45 days. There's actually a court case involving a Wayne County case where they, back early on, I think in '82, they had a plan, they approved it. It was rejected by the courts. And then the issue was, can they now do a new plan, or must they vote amongst the other plans that were submitted? The court said, no, you can, if you don't get one that's approved, it goes back to you to recreate a new plan. So again, it's probably important to get a plan in unless you're going to pass that off to the ones other people draft and submit to you. So if you want to approve one that you have put together, that's the process. Is you're going to need to get one that's approved within that 60 days or maybe 45 days, actually. The standards are actually in the statute themselves, and Betsy put together legal guidelines for apportionment. Those really come right from the statute, and it's probably the best thing to run through. We'll go through those and talk about the cases and the standards. I do review most of this in the legal review I gave you from our office. It's all in there as well, and talks about some of the cases, some of the major cases that are relevant. But let me kind of run through those. Again, they're statutory. And the first criteria, our first issue is for counties over 50,000, which of course we are. You need to decide how many districts you're going to, how many commissioners there'll be, how many districts you'll create it. And you've got the full range. Smaller counties have limits on how our maximum, but everybody over 50 is sort of at the maximum. So you can have anywhere from 5 to 21 districts. Of course, we have 9 now, and I think we've had that most of the time. I think when they first adopted this statute in the 60s, you actually had 21 because that was sort of where the Board of Supervisors came from. Mm-hmm. And one 10-year period, you had 5. The rest of the time, you've always had 9. But again, that's one of the decisions you'll need to make. And I think it's something to keep in mind from the timeframes you're dealing with, because every time you change the number, you then change all the districts. And so the tax mapping people would have to go through it all over again and create new maps. So it's, ideally, you want to get the number and the districts at the same time, or maybe the numbers first and then be able to do districts if you're comfortable with that. Again, those are decisions you need to make, though. Often getting the number of districts first and then moving the boundaries is a little easier, but not necessarily the only way you can do it. And that's really one of the first criteria. It says all districts will be single district and equal population as far as practical. Well, what does all that mean? Well, they're actually, those ones are interrelated because the population is near as practical being equal. That piece of it is tied into the one person, one vote, which is in the federal constitutional rulings coming out of the US Supreme Court. Though we have a little bit different standard than they do in the congressional standards for establishing districts. The reason the one district is there were some cases that have gone to the courts where they've equalized population by giving more than one representative to a highly populated area. Like you maybe give Brighton 2 people instead of 1, and that would make the numbers all work out. That's not allowed in your statute. Your statute, you have to have 1 commissioner for each district. You can't have more than 1 from a district to make the numbers work. So that's how those are tied together with the population thing. You are directed to do it a specific way by Michigan statute. That it's not mandated by federal law. It's essentially a Michigan law. That standard is, it has a lot of interesting background because initially, well, of course, initially at one point in time, county commissioners reapportioned themselves. And then in the 60s, we ended up getting this body created. And from that point on, you've then had a lot of development of law and apportionment and reapportionment, both in the federal and local level. Initial cases were primarily federal ones on congressional adjustments in the federal sector. And some of them arose to, I think there's both an Alabama and a Tennessee case from the early 60s that ordered them to do something because they hadn't reapportioned since 1903. And had no interest in doing so, apparently. Essentially that sort of created the law. Out of those came the law on the one person, one vote, though. Essentially, that was a standard that came up in Warren Court back in the 60s and 70s. Then the question is, how did that apply to Michigan? Prior to that, well, when they got to that, they then essentially said that's pretty much a strict standard for congressional redistricting. For local, which would both be state legislature and local, like we're dealing with at the county level, they provided more flexibility. And one of the relatively early cases came out with the standard that if you're plus or minus 10%, if you're essentially presumed okay. If you're more than that, you have to prove why you have to be more than that. And there are a few that they've approved that have been over that, but typically you wanted to be between that standard. Prior to that ruling out of the US Supreme Court, the Michigan Supreme Court had in a case basically said 11.9% is okay. And again, involving the Wayne County case. In 1982, it was a really broad case that covered a lot of parts. It's probably still a core case on how to interpret this statute. And essentially, they had 11.2, so that quickly was followed by a number of cases saying where you were over 10, but within the 11.9, is it okay or not okay? And ultimately, the bunch of Court of Appeals cases said you're not okay. And then ultimately, a Supreme Court, US Supreme Court case looking at a local county, actually reapportionment out of New York State, I think, said over that amount is okay. And then so the 11.9 came back in under Michigan law. So under Michigan law, you're probably okay having a variance of 11.9. And I'm assuming you may understand the variance, but let me jump into that. It essentially is the percentage differences from the largest number of people in a particular district versus the district that has the smallest number of people. So it's not supposed to vary between the smallest and the largest by more than 11.9%. There was a case that came along on that issue of, I think it involved Wayne County yet again. No, I'm sorry, I think it is an Oakland County case where they were within the 11.9, but they still had like almost 6% variations between districts. And the question was, is that okay? And the court said, yes, after they reversed the Court of Appeals to do that. So that's sort of where you are on the number piece of it. And though there are a number of criterias, that's probably the key one that you need to look at, because that one is the one that gets most tested. Going down the standards, the next one is all districts must be contiguous. Well, what does that mean? It means they got to touch somewhere, at least. They've got to, you can't have islands off somewhere. I don't know that anyone in this state's ever tried to do that, but you have to touch. You can't have the districts all have to be in some way touching. And that their districts are supposed to be compact and as nearly as square as practical, depending on the geography of the county, which obviously if you're on the shoreline somewhere, you're not going to be a square anyhow. But essentially those two criteria are essentially deal with trying to approach gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is it's actually named after a governor of Massachusetts who was vice president under James Madison. So it goes back a long way. And while in Massachusetts governor, he created a district that kind of went all the way around and it looked like a salamander. So the name came gerrymander. And essentially the gerrymandering is configuring the district in such a way that's not at all compact. And it's essentially usually designed for some specific reason. And that's of course resulted in, and even though the populations may be within the guidelines, might be within the 10%, might even be less than 10%, you could still get litigation involving gerrymandering. The issue has been a recent one that we dealt with in the courts, because initially most of the cases involved issues where the districts had disparate impacts on minorities, essentially racial or ethnic background problems. And they then used that as a basis to challenge those districts successfully in many cases, even though the population variance was still within the, in most of them are federal cases, so still within the 10% variation. The more recent issues, and actually it's not recent, it's been an issue floating around for probably 20 years, but it's been decided in the last year and a half, last 2 years, is whether having districts that are oddly shaped like that and have disparate impact, but not on ethnic or racial, but on partisan reasons. Is that okay? And from the federal law 2 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled, we're not going to get involved in that. That's a political issue, which means they're throwing it back on you guys, basically. Though that doesn't mean you still couldn't get state issues on that. But essentially it's no longer, there's a big dispute on whether that's okay or not to do it based on partisan reasons. I don't think it's probably in your case, because your statute, if you go all the way down to the last criteria, is the district should be not drawn to have an effect on partisan political advantage. So you've got one in your statute saying you're supposed to be avoiding that. Other states do not. So then it came down to an issue of whether or not that redistricting, they could do it for political reasons, and then, but not for racial reasons or ethnic reasons. Again, the concept of being contiguous and being essentially compact and trying to be square is to avoid that. Essentially, you're supposed to have blocks rather than, snakes or salamanders or whatever. The next three standards all relate to boundaries, essentially. They're supposed to attempt to be you're not supposed to try to combine townships with parts of cities into a single district. You're not supposed to have try to chop up villages, city townships and cities, and you're not even supposed to try to chop up precincts if you can avoid it. So how does that all fit in? Well, it's sort of, those are all criterias, and it ended up being a debate that was actually dealt with in that very early 1982 case of, are there a priority amongst those list of things? Again, the ones involving 4, 5, and 6 on your list, which basically are municipal boundaries, they're essentially saying you're not supposed to do that unless you need to do it for to make the population piece work, to make the one vote person one vote. So you're supposed to try to stay within local governmental unit boundaries and even precinct boundaries if you can, but if you can't for population reasons, it's okay. It left the argument of, okay, what has priority between being compact and contiguous versus boundaries, which should have the priority there between those. And the court basically said, you look at those case by case. There was an argument that the statute is actually listed in the very order that we have on this list. And there was initially an argument that the court rejected, that you should go for the list. The top one's most important, second one's second important. You can go right down the list, which would make political advantage least important, I guess. But the court rejected that and essentially said, no, that you have to balance all of them. There's not a specific order that you have to deal with. And some of those ironically related, going all the way back to the top one on population, where there's at least one case where they could have had it a little bit lower than 11.9, but to do that, they would have moved a lot of municipal boundaries. And the argument was they should be able to do that. And the court said, you don't have to do that. It's important to know that what's the test on all this when you if you do get challenged on it later on. If you meet the criteria, particularly the population one, they do look at that one closest. You won't be second guessed in theory by the courts as to which is the best plan, as long as you meet the criteria. Essentially, courts try to stay away from they look at it as a political question. Now, if you don't meet the criteria, you've got 13% here on a deviation or something as far as variance, or you've chopped every single boundary, every municipality and township in the county you've chopped up, you may still get challenged on that. But generally speaking, if you meet most of the criteria and they're weighing various plans, courts are not supposed to weigh in which is the best plan. That's what you're supposed to do. Even if you get beyond the 60 days and you end up looking at other people's plans you're picking from, you're the one who picks from those other plans on which is the best plan. So again, that gets to be your role. And that's sort of, as was mentioned earlier, that's where you get a little bit of partisan versus legal and how it mixes together. These are basically guidelines for you insurance to make sure that you, in making those decisions, you will do it in a framework that is supposed to deal with all of these criteria, which will, in theory, balance it. At least that's the concepts that they put in the statute. Now, of course, it's different a little bit for congressional. In fact, it's going to be really different in this state because for the first time, we've got a reapportionment. Instead of the legislature redistricting, you've actually got a commission redistricting. And so that we'll have to see what becomes of that. There actually it's not a new concept that was actually approved by the Supreme Court in a case in another state, that you could have those districts rather than those independent commissions rather than the legislature or Congress doing it. Not our issue here. You are clearly authorized to do it, to do this. Again, that's kind of briefly going through the criteria. And it is the early Wayne County case in 1982 that basically said, how do you weigh all these? And essentially came up with the conclusion that theirs got down to ones where they both were okay population wise, and they both split about the same amount of boundaries. They tried not to split boundaries, but one was a little more compact than the other. So the question is, does compact, they got to the issue as compact versus splitting districts, where do those weigh? And they basically said, you get to balance those. You don't have to have to have, they're not strict rules as long as you try to do the matching as best you can. And that's a real brief overview. We do cite some of the other cases that back up some of what I've said in the opinion. And of course, we'd be glad to give you any assistance as you go through the process. It is an interesting process, and in some ways it's become more interesting because of the timeframes you're dealing with. And you really have, you have to, as a Open Meetings Act requirement, post your meetings in advance, and you need to, obviously get the maps put together and evaluate them, and you need to evaluate all that in a relatively short period of time. So it ends up being a short period of time that we don't know when it's going to begin. It's actually supposed to begin already, and we haven't got the numbers. So essentially, it's going to, from some unknown date, it's going to move quickly. And so you have to evaluate that on how you're going to deal with approaching all of the potential issues. I don't know if there's any specific questions.
Yeah. Do any commissioners have questions? Go ahead, Judy.
Yes, thank you for your explanations. Very helpful. I'm looking at numbers 4 and 5 there. And is it your interpretation of those two items that if two maps both meet the population standard, that the one with the fewest breaks in township lines in townships would be the preferred map, that it would have to be chosen?
Well, again, you have probably some flexibility on that, because again, how does all of this meld together? And of course, I'm assuming that we don't run into a contiguous problem. That usually is pretty basic, because, but yeah, the courts are basically saying you weigh the compactness and you weigh the boundaries, but and actually in the case, that Oakland or Wayne County case in 82, they gave preference to the boundaries, of keeping the boundaries consistent. So it is one of the things you're supposed to try to do. Again, you do have, the issue comes down to what if you can keep the boundaries, but mine is only 8% off population and yours is 10% off population, but we don't count boundaries. You probably have some flexibility in making a decision which one's best. Now, if they're identical, they're both right on the nose at 10% boundaries, you would be the one that you probably be pointing towards keeping.
Thank
So
you.
there's a little bit of flexibility. There's a lot of moving parts. You got to make them all mesh, which is not going to be, it gets to be a challenge, but
Right.
I'm
Thank
sure
you.
you guys are up to it.
I have one other question regarding number 8. Is there a criteria that is commonly used to determine partisan political advantage?
I have not found a reported Michigan case on that one at all. There was actually a reported case that's saying you shouldn't be doing it on partisan reasons way back in the early before the statute went into place involving Kent County. But again, that whole thing, it got replaced by this statute that put this language in there. There could well be a decision that's not reported out there. I have not seen, but I have not seen any nice measurement of what that means. So now on the federal side and some of the gerrymandering suits, there's been issued. Of course, they ruled that's not a federal question. We're not going to talk about it anymore. But those they got into a little bit of trying to evaluate that. They did. There was all sorts of statistical variations they looked at. Whether those essentially could be used or not, I'm not sure. It has not, as far as I can tell, been litigated in a reported decision in Michigan. It's been in the statute since the very beginning, but it hasn't been discussed legally.
Thank you.
Are there other commissioners with questions? Dave, can you address, and I don't know if you're going to be aware of this, how are we defining the official release of the census data? I know there has been talk of a initial release in August, and then potentially another release at the end of September. How and what is going to define the official release of the census data?
Well, essentially, you're supposed to use what you get in that 15-day period from the Secretary of State. So you'll get something from them saying this is what to use.
Okay,
And that's the numbers, that's the version you should be utilizing.
okay,
So again, you have to, that's why we're sort of in a wait. I think there's some estimated ones out there already, but you can't, you'd probably be spinning your wheels trying to do maps on that at this point. Well, some people like to do that. So I noticed, I find there's all sorts of websites out there you can even create districts on. So it's interesting time of year to be dealing with this every 10 years. But technically, you're bound by the ones we get from the Secretary of State.
okay,
And if, someone says those numbers are bad, they need to challenge it through the Secretary of State. We essentially get those, and that's ends up being our kickoff point. And you notice it's from when it's published, which means it's not only you get it, it should be published at that point. So other people should be able to get it as well at that point. And it should become readily available. When that is, I mean, obviously that was all impacted by the census process and the COVID stuff that we had in the last year. And not a good guess at this point where we'll actually see it. But I don't think you'll get something official. If they give you something in August and said, this is not it, then we're stuck waiting until September. But it gets pretty close to election time there. So that's going to create some issues. But in any event, it's the official we get from the Secretary of State.
okay. Any further questions? Dave, thank you for coming, joining us and providing this. We are working hard on transparency through this process. And it's great that everyone has this education on how the statutory process is going to work. So thank you.
And I would mention, as the process goes through, if you get specific questions you think our office you'd like us to weigh in on, probably just go through your chair and they can forward it to us and we can try to deal with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. We shall move on through the agenda. We are now at the election of the permanent chair. So I will open the floor to nominations for the permanent chair of the Apportionment Commission.
I would like to nominate Prosecutor Reader as permanent chair.
I would second.
So we have a nomination from Jennifer Nash nominating David Reader. There has been support. Is there any other nomination? I'll
I move
ask.
to close nominations.
We have a motion to close nominations.
Support.
All of those in favor of closing nominations, please
Aye.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, nominations are closed. I'm going to go ahead then and ask for a unanimous vote appointing Dave Reader as our chairperson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I will hand the meeting over to our elected chairperson, David Reader. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda are the adoption of rules of procedure, which will guide this commission forward. There is a set of draft rules of procedure. I believe these have been provided by Mr. Stoker.
Well, if I can just briefly explain, I looked through various rules of procedures provided by other counties and kind of made a accumulation of the ones that made sense. And trust me, there were a lot that I had no idea what they meant with a rule in some of their procedures. And then I did have Mr. Stoker review the draft of the proposed rules. And so that's how these came to be. It is certainly open for changes. So I would recommend, anybody to speak up on those.
Are there any members of the commission that have comments regarding the draft rules of procedures as have been presented?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to have the commission discuss amending point 6 or adding a point after that that would put in our rules that we will take testimony from individuals of the public remotely at each of our meetings, that will be an option offered to the public at each of our meetings, that they can do it in person or remotely via Zoom.
I don't have any problem with that.
Well, normally when we have been hosting meetings remotely since the start of the pandemic, and anyone who attended via Zoom was eligible to participate in the call to the public. So I think the understanding by now is if there is a call to the public and it is a hybrid meeting, as these will be, that anyone in the remote attendance has that opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Would it be appropriate to add a provision that the meetings of this commission would be streamed as well by Zoom?
I think that's where my question comes in. We made the motion to record the meeting, but that didn't mean that it would be live on Zoom. So I just want to make sure that it will be hybrid meetings for the public to participate remotely.
Yes. Do you have exact language that you would like to propose that will accomplish your request? Because I agree, I have no problem including that in here. Sorry, I took over. I forgot I handed it off.
I would just add a sentence to number 6 to say that public comment can be submitted in person or online via Zoom.
From my perspective, it might be better under number 2, where it says all meetings of the Apportionment Commission should be held in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. Public notice of time, date, and place of meeting shall be given as required by such act. Then provide that all such meetings shall be hybrid, both in person and by Zoom.
I would support that.
That's not a motion, that's just suggestion.
If you're going to change item 2, I have something I want to change in that item as well. So I wanted to say, maybe we can put it all together, that public notice of time, date, and place of meetings shall be given at least 72 hours in advance by posting the information on the county's website, in addition to any other requirements of the Open Meetings Act. And then your language, the language that was public comment may be given in person or by Zoom, or the meetings will be held, will be streamed on Zoom. Whatever. your
So my
language was.
only concern would be, depending on when the census data is delayed, 72 hours is 3 days, and that's going to put us at a box towards the end. I would support, I believe the Open Meetings Act requires an 18-hour public notice. I would support going to at least 24 hours, but I think 3 days ahead of time is going to put us in a predicament.
Well, I'd prefer to see a little longer, but I think 24 hours is an improvement.
Is there a motion for the 24 hours and the hybrid Zoom meetings as well as public meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I will make that motion.
Is there a second?
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any discussion?
Will that also include, do we need to include that public comment can be made remotely? I think if it's hybrid, it's hybrid. Okay.
Anything else?
Under number 2, correct.
All those in favor signify this by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any other, that was for the addition to item number 2. Are there any other suggestions for additions, deletions regarding the proposed rules of procedure? I see in number 9, we have a blank.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we fill in the blank in number 9 with 14 days. That gives individuals, commissioners 2 weeks after we receive the data to draft maps. And according to the timeline, that would leave about 3 weeks left for the public to provide their comment and input on the maps proposed and for us to vote on a final map.
Any comments regarding that suggestion for item number 9?
I think that's adequate.
I would second a 14-day period for maps to be drawn.
Any discussion? It's been moved and supported for the addition of 14 days to the blank that's in item number 9. With no further discussion, all those in favor by signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Item number 9, we will put in 14 days. Any other suggestions regarding additions or deletions to the proposed rules of procedure that have been presented?
Yes, I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, add a sentence to item number 7 that would read, members of the public are also encouraged to submit maps and may do so either during the call to the public or by submitting 7 copies of the map, a general description of the districts to the commission at least 24 hours before a meeting of the commission.
Requiring ourselves to do 14 days. Should we make a requirement for members of the public to do the same?
I would support that motion, Judy, but if we can align their deadline, I'd hate for somebody to submit a map after we couldn't, and then we'd get in a pickle of how to consider a map of theirs and not ours. So I would support that as long as we align the deadlines.
Okay, so how would that read then? May do so within 14 days of the county clerk.
Releasing.
Mhm. Okay.
So are we looking at adding that language under number 8 or number 9?
Number 7.
Number 7.
Number 7. Number 7, yeah.
Mhm.
Members of the public are also encouraged to submit maps, may do so either during the call to the and may do so within 14 days of the county clerk sending the apportionment commissioners all census information received from the Secretary of State. Now, how will they know that? How will they know that we've received the census, that you've sent us information?
That would be up for us. I mean, we can post something on the website stating that, census data has been provided to all, commission members as of a set date. But if you don't mind my recommendation, maybe we just keep it as simple as members of the public may submit a map during the same time that commission members can. It just keeps it very simple and clean.
Okay.
But as far as we'll be relying on you, on members of this commission and information from the website for getting this information out. It is very tight timeframes.
Mhm. And also the news media, perhaps?
Perhaps, they would be a great source. We can notify, WHMI and, as many media outlets as we can.
I think once it comes out, we're all going to know about
I think so too.
Michigan.
it. The 14-day time period should provide an adequate time. It's a tight time frame, but
It
should
is
provide
tight.
an adequate time.
Mhm.
So are we clear on the language then for item number 7?
I think so.
Chair, like particular members of the public who are submitting to who? They might come in between.
So that was going to be a generic question that I had outside of the rules was, if individuals of the public want to contact the commission with feedback, if you go to the county commission's website, you can email a general email and that is sent to all of the county commissioners. Who in the public should they contact to get a hold of the five of us? What email address or who will they be directed to? And how often will we receive those communications?
Mr. Chair, can I?
You have a suggestion?
Can I speak for real? When we set up the apportionment commission on the county's website, we list the contact person as the county clerk, and we provide the general county clerk email, which is countyclerk@livgov. My recommendation is, since we've had that page published, I am more than happy to forward within 24 hours of receipt of any public communication to all members of this board, public comment. So within 24 hours of it coming in on business days, we don't monitor that over Saturday and Sunday. We will forward that public comment to everyone. As far as maps, I would recommend, I want to be very clear that if someone sends a map, that they also provide a written description. That would be very helpful, just so that there is no misunderstanding. If they just say it includes all of Genoa Township, and if there is a split in their map, let's say it includes Genoa plus Brighton Charters 1 and 2. Write that out for us so that there is no ambiguity on what your intent for that plan is. But I would recommend that they be submitted to the county clerk, and we will forward those maps to members of this commission.
Is there a website right now that the IT has?
There
for
is.
the
Diane,
district?
can you share that?
I found this on the web for the website, right?
Siri will tell you all about it.
Wow,
Scary.
and she's on silent.
This website, while Diane's pulling that up, this website also contains every commissioner, apportionment commissioner's name and email address.
You said county clerk at livgov.gov, correct?
livgov.com.
And sorry, we're trying out a new device today. And so obviously it's not showing on the most important screen, it's showing on the two smaller screens. So hopefully you can see. So a couple of things I want to show you here is that you get the most, the meetings that are coming up on the county homepage right in this area. So you'll notice that the apportionment committee meeting is posted there, or the link to that. If you go to government on the main tabs and choose apportionment commission, it takes you to the page. And you'll notice there's a link here to a flyer. Commission members are all listed. And the meetings are available here. And the agenda. The full agenda is available here and the cover page is available there.
Is it possible that as these plans are submitted, that those can be put up on the website as well?
It is possible.
Can you scroll down a little bit farther on that page so that that is where it's going to display the contact information with the county? See right at the bottom
I was
there.
going to ask, okay.
So that's the email.
Diane, is there any way, could you go back to the front of the county's website, please? Instead of making 3 clicks, can you please, under the left-hand column, can you just include apportionment commission?
It's already there.
Okay. So members of the public need merely go to the front page and click on apportionment commission there. Okay. And it'll take you to the same page, correct? Thank you.
And I'm going to recircle back to the question I asked, the plans as they come in. I asked if it was possible to put those up as well, so that they're available to all members of the public to be able to look at what's been submitted. And you seem to hesitate a little bit.
Well, the reason I hesitate is because it would be nice to have them come in a standard format. I don't know what that is. So, if somebody sends an image of, if they send a picture of a map, that, I don't know that that's going to give us the same value as if they actually
Written
send in
plan.
the GIS data that we map out. It's just a matter, we obviously can post all of them. It's just what would be of most value to the public. That's where my hesitation.
All
comes
of
in.
them would be most valuable.
Is the information submitted to the commission via that included in minutes or official records? I don't know how I currently handle email submissions. I don't believe they are.
No, they are not kept in the minutes. They will be kept in a packet available for the public if they wanted to take a look. But no, we don't include those in the minutes.
What type of workload would it be for the clerk's office to include copies of the maps along with the comments submitted to the commission in each meeting agenda packet?
Can you scan those into eScribe?
We could potentially get those, the plans, we could scan those and put them into a PDF. So everything that's on the web is into a PDF format, whether they come in an image or if they're created out of GIS, we could still get them into, I could scan them off our printer and get them into a PDF format, so they would be more.
It's just
they
the
would be
volume.
available. They would not necessarily be interactive, but they would be at
That's-
least
yeah.
available.
They would be available.
And as far as the burden on the clerk's office, it's how many are submitted. If we have 5 comments submitted compared to 5,000, that's a big work volume difference. But we're here for transparency. So I prefer that this information be public. Dave, do we have to worry about anything redacting? Do we have to redact someone's private email address? What are we opening up if we're putting this information out in a formal board packet? Could you please walk me through any landmine with disclosing someone's their email address?
I'm not sure you would have to, but I think it would probably be prudent to put the name in. I think it would probably be prudent to put the name in without the personal contacts. Obviously, if it's a corporate one, it's probably not as big of an issue, but if it's a home email or personal, it's probably, but again, you need to identify it. So if it's John Doe putting a plan in, it would be John Doe's plan of submitted whatever date, and that way you could identify it that way.
Do they have to list what township or city they come from? Don't they have to be? a
Dave,
resident
is
of
there
Livingston
not?
County?
So I believe there is standing case law on, sorry, you're sitting right behind me and I have to be at the microphone. I wish I could turn more. You can't edit what the public sends in. But what are we required? Because if you email the commission or you email the county, it's FOIA-able. What are they required to redact under FOIA versus what would we be required or to redact in a board packet?
Really only personal information. So I'm assuming that's all it's going to be in there that would be redactable.
At the same time, we do ask people to give their address when they sit in front of us and give public comments. So, and that's going to be recorded and up online as well.
I would just ask the commission members to remember, you will be receiving the full thing. What we're talking about is what's going out into the public packet. So you're going to receive that communication direct from the the county clerk email address. I think what we put into the public packet, please bear in mind, you'll have the original with the information. So I would just say, let's be respectful and redact private information.
So when we scan these in as a PDF, just indicate the name of the person that submitted it,
And we'll black out
any contact information.
contact information.
So would it be prudent to circle back to Judy's first motion, which is your number 7, right? We're on number, and I don't know if these two should be together. Members of the public may submit maps to countyclerk@livgov.com. And then Clerk Hundley, you had a good phrase that said during the time, what was your phrase exactly there?
Maps must be submitted within the same time frame apportionment commissioners have to submit maps.
Okay, so members of the public may submit maps to countyclerk@livgov.com. Maps must be submitted during the same time period that apportionment commissioners have to submit maps. I don't know if communication is the proper word. I'll default to
Recording,
you.
right?
Sent to the apportionment committee shall be included in the public packet. And I don't know if communication is the correct word though, but we're looking for maps. And if somebody just sends an email that even says your map sucks, I'd like to have that on record as well.
I guess my question was, if they're emailing us the maps, Betsy, weren't we required to have 7 copies? So if they we can't print all the 7 copies of maps.
A lot of maps and I'm printing 7 colored copies and I'm getting.
Of the agenda packet.
No, but if they submit a map, I don't want maps submitted via email by the public, Megan. I prefer that they have to submit 7 copies, just like we do, in person to the county clerk's office,
Okay.
so that we're all functioning under the same guidelines. Because I will be labeling the maps in the order that they're received.
So the members of the public may submit maps to the county clerk's office. 7, well, I guess we need to spell that out. Members of the public may submit 7 copies of a proposed map to the county clerk's office during the time period the apportionment commissioners have to submit maps.
7 copies.
Correct. That's for, I guess it says any plan submitted, so that would cover members of the public. Okay. So just members of the public may submit maps to the county clerk's office during the same time period the apportionment committee members have to submit maps. Is that what you were going for, Judy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they would have 7 copies as well, under 8, so.
Correct.
Is that a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Is there support?
Support.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any other suggested additions or revisions to the proposed rules of procedure? Has it been so far modified by several different motions?
Yes, I wanted to add an item 13. In order to promote maximum participation by the general public, meetings of the commission shall be held in locations throughout the county, including Hamburg Township, Heartland Township, and the John LaBelle Public Safety Complex. My thinking is that I want to make sure in the public's mind that it's clear that we're a separate body from the county commission, and that this really isn't about the county commission, current county commissioners, but it's about the public's right to have fair maps in the future. And we should sort of separate ourselves from the county commission and also be closer, I think, to the public. If they're bringing in maps, I think it might be easier for them to talk about their maps in person. And if we're closer to where more of the people are, they might take advantage of that opportunity. We should at least, in interest of transparency and openness, make the offer.
It's been a motion. Is there a second? It's been a motion. Is there a second? Hearing none. Is there any other suggested additions or revisions to the rules of procedure that have been prepared?
I will move to adopt the 2021 Rules of Procedure as amended by the changes that have been made.
It's a motion. Is there a second?
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
I did notice a typo in item 3. The word "with" is missing after "in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act." Could that be corrected ministerially, administratively?
Friendly amendment, we'll make that addition. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I just would like to point out, I appreciate the spirit of the previous amendment offered that failed. My big concern for not supporting it comes down to money and technology. If we're going to have hybrid meetings throughout the county, I recognize the cost that it bears to put a hybrid meeting together and the technical complications for the county IT department. And that was my deciding issue. I don't want to be spending thousands of dollars to make sure that we're setting up the communication for that.
I think the comment's out of order. We've already asked for discussion.
Sorry.
The present motion, which has been supported, is that for the adoption of the rules of procedure as have been amended. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is discussion of redistricting software options. Livingston County GIS presentation with Ms. Greger. Ms. Greger, hello again.
Hello.
Long time no see.
I realize that it's probably best for me to be actually on Zoom, and I'm not on Zoom currently, so I'm going to join the Zoom meeting so that the presentation will be available to remote folks as well. Oh. I am not. Sorry, maybe we need a bathroom break or something.
Diane, would you like Joe to provide the Bureau of Election update one? Oh, sorry, forget it.
Is it going to be just a second time?
It is. I'm just trying to locate the meeting invite so that I can join. That might be quicker. Okay. Where you're at. Client. I've got too many things open. Okay. 399. 700. Okay. And then we'll need to have you share, screen share.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, says you disabled. No, it's not. Are you guys signed on to the same?
Yeah, that's why.
Oh. That's all right. No, it's not.
Did you email Renee?
Says the host is disabled screen sharing. You know, I think it might need to be changed in the settings. It says you're the host.
Showing she's got it disabled.
Phew. Okay, Hi, everyone. Oh, so let's see if I can make that go away. Okay. So I'm Diane Greger, and I'm the applications manager here at Livingston County. And sitting next to me is Sandon Lettieri, and he is our GIS coordinator. So we're very happy to have him on board, and he will be invaluable through this process. Just to give you a little bit of background, right now you'll see that this is our current district map for our commissioners. And go ahead, Sandon.
With GIS, basically, we create, manage, analyze, and maps of all types of data. GIS connects data to a map, integrating location data, where things are, with all types of descriptive information, what things are like. GIS is used in nearly every industry, but is an invaluable source for government. Nearly 90% of inquiries that government receives are geographically related. And over the years, since I've been with the county, GIS has become more and more important to a lot of different functions across the county. Livingston County and our GIS, we use GIS here for a lot of different things. Our most popular online applications, for instance, are tax parcel mapping, our COVID-19 case dashboard, and our crime mapping. We also have other applications for town halls. Election polling places was one of our first applications and proves to be very popular around election time. And recently, in the last couple of years, we started mapping our election results online on election night, which is also tends to be very popular. We also have parks and recreation, county zoning. You can look up your elected representatives, at least at the state and federal level, and also your commissioner. We have FEMA flood mapping, but besides our online mapping, we have very important roles across the county, such as central dispatch gets road and address data on a relatively, basically on a monthly basis. So anytime new addresses are issued, they go into the system. So if somebody calls 911, dispatch can get the correct folks to their house. We're also working right now with hazard mitigation planning, and we've also worked with radon mapping, which has been another relatively hot topic around radon awareness month.
So you want to take this one, or
Sure.
I can?
So during the 2010 redistricting project, the county had utilized this free extension to ArcGIS Desktop through Esri, and you could just add it on, and it does a lot of the figuring out of population and other demographics if configured. The previous GIS coordinator, Carrie Blau, had discussed with me, sort of the procedures that she had gone through with this and such. The tool is still available and does work with current releases of ArcGIS Desktop. Essentially, when Carrie had gone through the project during 2011, they would pass maps, the commission would pass maps along to her, and basically the primary goal was to try and retain the precinct structure so that it was easier on the local clerks to for election purposes. And revised maps were relayed back and forth as changes were made.
So using GIS for this current project, the choice of which tool that we use really needs to be based on the needs of you, the members. will you folks want to be hands-on? And if you want to be hands-on, will you be using your own tools? Or I'm assuming that internal folks will definitely be using the tool that we decide upon internally. But as far as the party chairs, will you be using an external tool that your party provides, or how will that work? So we would like some input on that. And if you do use an external tool, what are the capabilities? It would be awesome if you could provide the GIS data in a format that we can then import into our system.
Diane, when you say the commission members that are
Yes.
Clerk, the treasurer, and myself,
Mhm.
are you indicating that on our county computers, we would have access to the GIS mapping?
Well, it depends on the tool that yes, you would, no matter what tool we use. There are 3 different tools that we're looking at. Yeah, we'll move into that. Okay. And do the map sets need to be used in a collaborative manner? So we have 3 viable options. We can use the tool that Sandon just spoke about. It's free. We could use the Michigan Bureau of Elections supplied tool. It is also free, but there are a few limitations with it. Or we could use the Esri, which is the company that our GIS application provides. We could use their redistricting application.
And that application is a cloud-based environment.
If it's cloud-based, does that mean that other members, the non-public members, would be able to have?
Can you go back one screen?
Sure.
I don't think they'd be able to have
One more?
access to draw anything on there per se.
My mic
but,
is
you
on.
know, but any new districts, I would assume, would be able to be, like, if you drew a map and she drew a map and she drew a map, then those maps could easily be shared online with the public.
So the first option that we're going to talk about is the tool that was used in 2010. Of course, it's been updated to be compatible with the current version of software that we're using internally now. This tool could be installed on county desktops, used within the county network for our internal apportionment commission members. Or if you choose to have a staff member do your GIS work for you, you could do that as well, at your direction, of course. It definitely would require training. We would be providing documentation, which would be the editing and evaluation of the results, how to export and store map versions for review. And if you folks decided, midstream that you're going to change the number of commissioners, that would need to be set up by GIS.
It's not a difficult thing to set up, though.
So it is available immediately. Sandon has been playing with it, for lack of a better word. And Sandon would act as the training person and also support for the tool. And again, my question is, what will the party chairs use? Because if we went with this option, that kind of keeps them from using a centralized tool.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? Diane, is it possible to issue the party chairs temporary county laptops so that they can perform this, have access to the same functionality that the internal members have? Are there some laptops that you could load with just this functionality for our party chairs?
They would have to have county credentials. And I cannot answer whether or not that would be allowed. So, but it is a good question and I can find out.
I can tell you from my interaction, and you're with the IT, but the laptops are almost impossible to come by.
They are hard to come by.
Their supply chain is severely restricted.
If we,
I had one prosecutor say to me the other day that his laptop was old enough to vote.
I'm sure that's not exactly true.
Well, at least that's the way he felt. I know in our office, and I'm just one office in the county, I mean, we're waiting for a number of laptops for people in our office that are having severe problems, so.
At one point, we did have spares. I don't know if we have any left, and I know that they were old, so we would be dealing with older technology that they would be using. So in addition to the fact that we would have to have them have county credentials, and they're not county employees, so I can't really answer whether or not that's a possibility.
I do know from a software point of view that it would be doable.
Okay,
So,
so we're sharing this
Oh, yeah.
mic.
so I do know from a software standpoint that it would be possible. It's just about whether or not it's allowed.
Could I ask a question?
Go ahead.
If, for example, I used another tool and could come to somebody in the county and say, these are the precincts and these are the districts, could they create the map for me? Could there be like a staff person that could work with us if we brought data or, lists of precincts, basically?
Yes, I think so.
And I'm going to, Sandon's busy, so if we had all 5 commission members coming to him with requests, that might get a little bit dicey just because he's got his regular job to do, but we would do everything that we can to accommodate your requests.
Well, why don't we go through the other options?
Yes, we will. Okay. Okay, so the second option is the Michigan Bureau of Election Supply tool. This one is not available immediately. The expected release date is September 1st. They are looking at a mid-August demo timeframe. It is free. It doesn't matter much to you guys, but it will come with preloaded with, the census data, but it doesn't take long to load it into the tool that we just discussed. It will allow multiple users. At the time that I updated the slide, I needed more information on how the permissions would work. And since then, we did hear from the Board of Elections, and the way that the permissions work is that you would have 2 roles, either an editor or a viewer. If you're an editor, you would have the rights to edit any plan on the system. That means that if Betsy makes a plan, prosecutor, easy for me to say, prosecutor reader could edit Betsy's plan, or if Megan makes a plan, Judy could edit that plan. The permissions are not to the person, they're to the whole environment. So that's pretty much that tool.
Looks like it can produce
Can I
like
ask
shape
a-
files
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
maps.
Mhm.
So if you did create a plan through that, it would be advisable to at least export out your plan, whether in a map format or in a shape file format, so that it is preserved.
I have just a couple questions and I don't know if we can answer these yet. Can you have more than one map at a time going in the BOE? Okay, so that's the important thing.
Maps,
You
but
can have
there's-
multiple maps.
map plans, but there isn't the ability to lock it down to, if I create it, I'm the only one who can edit it.
Okay,
And then there's a tool that ESRI or ESRI or whatever we're calling it these days markets, and it is an annual subscription. It's an online tool. It can have multiple map sets. It allows licensed users to create and revise their own or shared maps. It would require training for folks that are unfamiliar with GIS, but it is fairly intuitive. You can use it to compare map plans. And it is available immediately. However, of course, we would need to get licensed for it and pay for it. The cost for a 12-month subscription is $4,500 per user, per editor. And if we go the route of licensing each commission member, and then we would need a license for Sandon as well, that would be 6 licenses at the cost of $27,000. And you get a 12-month subscription, but let's face it, we're not using it for 12 months. So it's just for a few months that we would be paying that amount of money. It is an unbudgeted expense. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they do not offer any kind of shorter term subscription on that.
My comment, no wonder I receive 2 emails a week from you.
Yeah, they're looking for business.
Yeah, she's persistent.
Just a kind of for the future note. In order to have these meetings be efficient, we want to make sure that the maps are submitted in agreed upon time frame, and you guys already discussed that in your requirements. So, and then we would make sure that everyone gets the maps that are created. And as far as a recommendation, in view of the fact that it's somewhat uncertain that we will get that Board of Elections tool at the date that they say we will, and the fact that there is a potential that people could edit other people's maps, I'm not in favor of the Bureau of Elections tool, and spending $27,000 for a few months of work seems excessive to me. But we also have to keep in mind what tools are available to our external members. So if you folks can create your own maps separately using the ESRI add-on, may be a viable choice. And we could look at getting the software installed on the individual machines needed. We could keep a versioned repository of the submitted maps, which I think is a good idea. And of course, we already talked about that we would ensure that all the maps that get sent to the commission members. So.
Are desktops easier to come by than laptops?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Is it possible that, I'm talking out loud just because exploring here, that a desktop could be set up within the GIS public area that would Sandon could load up suggested maps made by either party chair, and they could be worked on by the members of this commission year?
I think that is a viable option.
Seems
So
reasonable.
That's a great idea.
I'm just trying to throw something out.
And we have a couple of empty cubicles that we could position the tool or the device with the tool on it. Yeah. Good.
I mean, one thing I could add about the state of Michigan Bureau of Elections is that, there's still some time for them to come up with something a bit more compelling. Just right now, they don't have a whole lot of information and we haven't seen the actual product. So based on just our feedback with the State Bureau of Elections, it's just not sounding very viable at this time.
Mr. Chair, can I
Yeah,
make a
go ahead.
comment? I was at first skeptical about the program through the BOE, but I am more positive following Joe's discussion with Mr. Dave Tarrant at the Bureau. I would not exclude that as a possibility. I do believe it may be ready and functional by the time we receive these numbers. So I'm inclined to stay open to the Bureau of Elections tool and the GIS desktop that was already no cost, as long as we all have equal access to that tool. That's my goal, is equal access, so those that want to draw maps can do that. So I'm positive or favorable to the first two options. I'm not inclined to, we aren't even talking a few months. We are going to have a 45-day window to do this. And the cost of $27,000 for a 45-day window is not, in my mind, an effective use of taxpayer dollars when I believe we'll have two viable options.
When do we have to make this decision? Do we have to decide today or?
So the thought was that the Bureau of Elections tool would possibly be available for a demo mid-August. I would think that we could possibly set up a demo and you could look at the tool then to make a decision shortly afterward.
I believe they are showing some sort of screenshots and slides at an upcoming GIS user group meeting in a couple of weeks. And I think, was it August 16th, they were going to do a demo, which they would also record so that it could be shared across. And I think by then all of us will have a better idea as to the capabilities and that of the system and, whether it will fit our needs or not. But I mean, worst case scenario, we do have the desktop option as a backup.
So Sandon has the desktop option on his laptop right now. If you want a quick look at it, we could do that. We're getting close to the end of the meeting, assigned meeting time, so I don't know whether or not you want to, but if you do, it's a possibility.
What I'm thinking is we haven't gotten to scheduling our next meeting or any of us calling a meeting, but maybe we might come back and revisit this issue in early September after the Bureau of Elections information regarding their software tools available. We have a little bit more information on it. We could look at the presentation by Sandon on the existing ArcGIS tool that we have. And that'll still be before the projected time for the data released by the census. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I think that's a good option, especially as we've been here for an hour and 45 minutes already.
Joe, you were going to go over Michigan Bureau of Elections information on redistricting tools. Okay. Is there a general consensus that we might just want to go ahead and wait?
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Number of commissioners? I'm trying to envision this room with 21.
Mr. Chair, may I just make a comment? I included this here because the first step in this process really is determining how many commissioners we're going to have. We can't even really play effectively, not that it's playing with maps. You cannot begin to effectively draw maps without knowing how many seats you need to have that map contain. So I included it here. I didn't include it as it has to be decided today, but I wanted to give that option so that if people do want to start working with maps, that we'll have that capability.
I guess it would be good to see how big of a population increase there is in the county. If it were a lot bigger than what is apparent to us, somebody might think we need more commissioners. But if it's more or less stable, that would dictate, maybe staying where we are. So, until we see the data, probably wouldn't want to make a final decision.
Anyone else? Any thoughts? I think the 2020 census data, the estimates, I've always been sort of a numbers geek looking at it. It was about 100. We just passed Saginaw County as the 10th largest county in the state. It's around 191,000 from the Census Department's estimate, at least more or less somewhere around there, from what I remember. I'm not sure what it was for the 2010 census when the present districts were drawn. So about a 10 or 11,000. What's the size of the current districts?
Around 20,000.
Okay.
Currently, we have a little over 160,000 voters. So that number. Close to the line.
Mr. Chair, I can just say that I did some research. I don't have it right here in front of me. I did some research based on the publication out of the Michigan State University, and I looked at the counties that were 10 larger than us and 10 smaller than us. And we have, take for example, Washtenaw County has a much larger population. They as well have 9 commissioners. Then there are smaller counties, I want to say Eaton County, that may have more commissioners that are substantially smaller than us. So there's, just from, I will provide that information. It is published from a University of Michigan book on government, and it contains that information. I'm very happy to share that with all of you.
From my own perspective, I served on the commission at one point in time, back in '96 through 2004. It was 9 members at that time. I like the idea of an odd number. Historically, we've had 9. It's within the range. It's not as small as it could be. it's not as large as it could be, it's somewhere in the middle. And I think it's, for myself, it's easy to stay with that number. Now, if for some reason something came in where a map was put together that hit every box on every statutory requirement that was an odd number less, I might consider that. But I'm comfortable from my own perspective, I'm comfortable with the 9.
There is an additional cost with additional commissioners.
I would, Mr. Chair, I would echo the odd number of commissioners. So if the commission were to consider increasing the number we have, we would be looking at 11. And I just think 11 is too many for our county.
What's the cost? It's taking and renovating this room.
And so I would, my initial feeling is that I think we are probably at the proper number as well.
I do not see that big of a population. If the estimate of 191,000 is in the ballpark, even in the ballpark, I do not think that it would substantiate raising the number of commissioners to an 11. So, I guess the question is could we set that number if we have a meeting early in September so that as we develop maps, you know, we know what we're working with.
Yeah, I think with, if 191,000 is accurate, districts are going to be about 21,000 population, which isn't that much different. So.
At census.gov, I just pulled it up. It's 191,995 is the last estimate. It shows back in 2010 as 180,967. Is there a motion for the number, or do we want to wait until our next meeting?
I'm comfortable motioning that we maintain 9 county commission districts in the 2021 reapportionment process.
Makes it easier for submitting maps. Is there a second
I'll support it.
discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Discussion for future meeting dates. I previously proposed something in early September to go over the software tool discussion. Thoughts in that regard?
I certainly like that. I just don't know what date it will be. So I think we can plan on that, but I don't know for sure when we're going to have the software released to us. We can, it's easier to set it up now and just say we don't have it than to potentially work on our schedules after the fact. Sure.
September 1st is on Wednesday, I think. Friday works best for the commission. The state 2 more days to actually get it to us.
That'd be the 3rd, the 3rd or the 10th.
The 3rd is slightly better for me.
At 1 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm flexible for that. So that would work for me, September 3rd.
So we'll set the next meeting date for September the 3rd at 1 o'clock. That could go up on the website, and be posted.
Mhm.
Any additional business?
I do not have any.
Motion to adjourn,
Support.
moved and supported. All those in favor,
Aye.
motion carries. Adjourned.
Thank you.